Greetings. Welcome, my children, once again. You know, sometimes it can be very nice to get out into the great and brave the great outdoors. Many people have made it their passion to do certain activities. Jogging, running, swimming, something I used to do and teach. Hiking. Now that's a more common one. Hiking, specifically hiking mountain trails. A lot of things can happen. One wrong move and you could end up slipping off. Perhaps you run into unsavory creatures, both man and animal. Or perhaps you'll even run into some inhuman creatures, true swine. Maybe some feral children wielding scythes wearing paper plate pig masks. Nah, I'm just messing with you. Or am I? No, children. In that same vein, though, as I said, much can happen when venturing the slippery slopes of peril, the mountains of madness, as my old friend and muse Howard Philip Lovecraft so eloquently put it. Yes. Join me, children, as I bring to you the list of the top 6 mountainside tragedies. Our first entry takes us back to July in 1936, where 4 experienced German and Austrian climbers set out to tackle the north face of the Eiger Mountain. Everything started off well enough, and it looked as if the team would make it all the way up the summit of the mountain until one of them sustained a major head injury from the falling rocks. The group were forced to turn back and downclimb as he was unable to continue their ascent. However, sometimes you find out only too late that you reached the point of no return, as upon their descent, when they reached the Hintertossier Traverse, they found that it was uncrossable, and they were forced to try and continue their descent down the north face. And only a few days later, an avalanche hit the group, sending one of them falling all the way to their death, and the other one slamming into the north face wall, killing him instantly. The one who had been leading this charge, leading the descent, was pulled into the wall by the weight of the ropes and died minutes later of asphyxiation, while the last one remained uninjured. The rescue team attempted to reach him, but they couldn't get up to him, and so he was left hanging throughout the night in the blizzard. When the rescue team returned, he knotted the rope onto himself and began to try and descend safely. It was going well until he reached the knot from the rescue team's added rope, and unable to manipulate his abseil gear over the knot, he looked to the rescuers and said 4 words in German: "Ich kann nicht mehr," or "I cannot go on anymore," and finally succumbed to the weather. Yes, sometimes the heights of heaven can also be a frozen grave. Our next entry takes us 10 years later to the Carnarvons in Scotland. In November of 1971, and 6 15-year-old high school students and their 2 leaders set off on a navigational expedition in a remote area of the Scottish mountains. The routine trip, however, quickly turned into a disaster when the weather deteriorated and they had to head for emergency shelter. Unfortunately, they never made it and ended up stranded, and where they remained for 2 nights on the high plateau in the harsh and wild blizzard. Search parties were organized from the Glenmore Lodge. More than 50 men took part in a manhunt, which included troops, police, and mountain rescue teams. Search had to be called off, though, as the weather drastically worsened and the night fell. Helicopters were dispatched to try and continue the search. And as the search continued, leaders and children had no option but to bivvy in the snow. But with the snow falling mercilessly, they soon became buried. 5 of the 15 and one of the leaders perished from the exposure. The sixth student and second leader managed to survive in what has been widely regarded as the worst mountaineering tragedy in British history. And they both survived, but not unscathed, both with severe hypothermia and frostbite. Next one takes us 3 years into the future, in July of 1974, when an ill-equipped group of 8 women attempted to make the first all-female ascent of Lennon Peak, which is a 7,000 meter climb. Once again, an ascent to heaven, meant only for an icy end, in an effort to prove that women were equal to men, and they would die just as equally. The group reached the summit on the 5th of August despite warnings from their meteorologist at base camp that inclement weather was inbound. Storm hit the team while they were on the summit, and they were given permission to set up camp and attempt to wait it out. While camped on the summit, the women's small cotton ridge tents were quickly destroyed by the high winds, and in the absence of a snow shovel to dig shelter, they were forced to try and descend. One by one, they each succumbed to the exposure on the mountain, and it's thought that their unwillingness to leave behind sick teammates was the reason they all perished. The team were also under such pressure to succeed and prove everyone wrong that they were willing to push themselves further into a situation they were never going to be able to get out of. Yes, women can live equally to men, and they will die just as equally by the hands of God. Remember this, my children, for I do not speak of discrimination, because again, the Reaper is indiscriminate. In the comments, type hashtag indiscriminate Reaper so that I may see you. Our next one involves another British mountain expedition that takes place in August of 1986, where a British climber attempted to climb on the K2's difficult northwest ridge, instead of just taking the usual Labruzi Ridge. After several unsuccessful attempts, his team decided to turn back. However, the British one, was a more resilient fellow. And he wanted success, and he would stop at nothing, so he decided to join up with various other climbers on the conventional route in an attempt to reach the top of the K2. On their descent from the summit, he and a few others fell asleep in the snow, or found one of their team asleep in the snow, and persuaded her to descend with them. They could not deter them, however, from continuing up, and the pair reached the summit at 7 p.m. But on the way down, one of them fell and were forced to bivvy out in the open. By the time all the climbers reached Camp 4, there was a storm blowing, and they decided to try and wait it out. But with no food or gas to melt snow, it was only a matter of time, and on the night of August the 6th, our British expeditionist ended up dying from high-altitude pulmonary edema, which is a condition where the altitude causes the lungs to fill with fluid. The rest of the team would end up moving in order to survive, and left on August 10th at the first sign of the break of the storm. One of them was in severe pain, however, he was conscious and left it behind in an attempt to die. Two others collapsed and died not far from camp, and only three who passed out on a fixed rope section and fell to their death. There were only two that survived. with their hands and their feet ravaged by frostbite. Our last one, children, takes us back to Lennon Peak. Yes, apparently they didn't learn their lesson last time. For on July 13th, 1990, 45 mountaineers were stationed at Camp 2 on the Razdelnaya route at 5 p.m. or 5,300 meters on Lennon Peak, preparing themselves for their next ascent to Camp 3. That evening, a minor earthquake ended up shaking the mountain, which loosened a serac and fell onto the slope above the camp, causing a massive snow and ice avalanche. Within seconds, and the entire camp had been wiped out, and 43 of the 35 had been buried in snowy graves. The two survivors could hear their comrades shouting for hours for help, but failed in any attempts to be able to rescue them, as the ice set like concrete immediately. A witness from Camp 1, over 1,000 meters below, remembered one of the two survivors stumbling onto the camp, saying, "They're all dead." The witness also reported feeling no earthquake at all due to the glacier absorbing the shocks. Rescue teams tried to recover the bodies of the deceased, but of the 43 that perished on Lennon Peak on July 1990, only one would ever be found. That, my children, was a list of the tragedies that take place on the slopes of mayhem. Remember, my children, the heights of heaven may just be the steps to a cold and unforgiving grave. Yes. Once again, I would like to thank Mr. Travis Bruce with the Horror Realm for allowing me to be your host tonight. As always, you may find me on Facebook under both my name, Thomas Stewart, and by joining my Corpse Child Sanctuary Facebook page, where all of my dealings in the Underdark are exposed. You may find me on Instagram at CorpseChild2001. You may find me on both TikTok and Slasher at Unholy Corpse Child. And of course, you may choose to join me in this sanctuary at www.corpsechildsanctuary.com, where all of my tomes of terror are available for purchase in the Citadel. Tomes such as this, or this, where the ebooks for these and so many others are available for cheaper than what you'll find on Amazon, and the paperbacks come signed by yours truly, along with both custom bookmark and free hand-drawn artwork done by the hand of the unholy. Once again, my children, may you all be forever robbed of a peaceful slumber. Sweet nightmares.